Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Radowski and Tim Picciott here on the Change the News channel. Today, we're going to change things up. Ha ha ha. Quirky music playing just like they do on the stupid, annoying mainstream media. No, we're not going to have that. We're going to have a real discussion with a Dr. Tim. Who are we going to be talking with?
Thanks, Luke. So we are talking today with Dr. Phranq Tamburri. Dr. Phranq is a naturopath and physician who has been been on top of the coronavirus issue since the beginning of January. He's very well respected in the alternative health community and very well known member to all of us here at Freedom's Phoenix community, where he has appeared hundreds of times as a co-host of Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. And in addition to his medical expertise, Dr. Phranq is also well known for his geopolitical and cultural analysis. He famously bet $1 that Donald Trump would win the nomination right after Trump came down the elevator to announce his intention to run. And at the same time, he also convinced Ernest Hancock, who's a pretty well-known voluntarist libertarian, to have co-host a weekly show called The Trump Report. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Phranq, but has that been going on? Was that going on since May 2015?
Yes, it has. We've had plenty of arguments to prove it every week. That's right.
Yeah, but right now, you've got a ton of information you could share with us when it comes to Trump. But with you being a doctor or being a naturopath, we just wanted to kind of see what you're seeing right now from the coronavirus side of things, and also where when this first kind of came on your radar and when you started taking this seriously.
And then, Tim, if I could add, I think the first question, I just want to get right into it. What's the important information that we're not hearing on the mainstream media? What's the information that's being denied to us? Doctor, go ahead and take the stage.
That's fair enough, not to bury the lead. There's many odds and ends we can get into. Some people are interested about different natural treatments or things, this and that. But no, the main thing is this. It was kind of hinted at by watching the British do their CDC analysis. And many times the stiff upper lip and the curtness and just directness of the British sometimes comes into play. They gave a press conference a number of weeks ago about this. Let me explain. What you're kind of missing and the dancing around that Donald Trump is doing, again, politics aside, when people keep asking about, well, how come he's not doing a hard quarantine? How come he's not taking it more seriously? Are you using the Army Corps of Engineers to make more, makeshift hospitals, gonzo hospitals? Are you getting ready to have, basically open group morgues that they're going to have? In Italy, they're having, basically group burials at this point. So things are going to get pretty dire, and many people on the left, especially with the politicalization we have going on, they're trying to throw this noose around with Trump. And Trump, I have to say, has been showing his distance, kind of dancing around along with his entire administration about some of these questions. He's very direct in his answers to almost every other question, but everything around that he's been pulling back from. So I want to explain what I think is being missed. And the British, as I said, sort of hinted at what is going on. It's what's called quarantine fatigue. And the concern is that if people quarantine too early, then they get blown out. People are very active at first. I deal with prostate cancer. That's actually my specialty, and that's a whole other discussion. But let me use prostate cancer for a second. Prostate cancer usually does not kill people immediately. Matter of fact, most people outlive it. 1 out of 40 chance that you'll die. Most people don't. But when people are first diagnosed, the first thing they want me to do is sell them tons of medicines and IVs, and they want to go to Tijuana, and they want to spend thousands of dollars, and they have to feel like they're doing something. If not, well, then it becomes a problem. But I try to explain to them, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you have to keep your powder dry until you see the whites of the eyes of this cancer, if or when it gets to the point where it truly is about to shorten your mortality. Then you throw your resources at it. It's hard for some patients to do that because when they're first diagnosed with cancer, they have to do something. That same mentality is going on here. First, people were laughing at the coronavirus, and I'll answer Tim's question later about why I got into this early. But, at the time, I was buying toilet paper and masks and goggles and everything back in January, and people were just laughing at me, and that's fine. I'm used to it. And I'm sure most people on this channel are used to being contrarian in most things in our life. But anyway, the thing is most people were not ready. If Donald Trump did what he should have done, and I'm not saying he was wrong, but if he turned around and had a hard quarantine back at the end of January, we could have perhaps avoided most of this. However, just think how that would have come off if he had a hard quarantine in January when we didn't even have really one case in America yet. You know what I'm saying? At least not known.
Well, Phranq, right now on screen. So
yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Right now on screen, I have a tweet from Chuck Schumer, and this is February 5th, exactly to your point. The premature travel ban to and from China by the current administration is just an excuse to further his ongoing war against immigrants. There must be a check and balance on these restrictions. So, on one hand, the Democrats are saying he's not doing enough, and then here they are just, a month ago.
Exactly.
He's doing
exactly.
too much.
Exactly. I mean, he had the balls to sit there and stop all traveling from China, and they called him a racist, and the usual cast of characters doing their, the usual isms on him. But, let's put that aside. So if he couldn't even do that, imagine telling everyone to stay home and keep your kids home and shut down the schools. Okay, that would never happen. Now, if you mentioned that today, you could go back in some DeLorean a month or so, then of course people would say, yeah, okay, well, the people would be up for it. But the point is, the cat's out of the bag, and when you understand the numbers and the R naught factor, and we can talk about that later, the specifics of what the R naught factor means as far as transmission, and why someone like me was really on top of this one early. It's because of that R naught factor. It was different than MERS, different than SARS. No. Anyway, that aside, so to get to Lou's point, what's kind of being missed? It's the fact that now that it's already out, now that people are paying attention, now they're in panic mode saying, well, tell me what to do. Tell me, doctor. Tell me, Mr. President. Shouldn't we shut everything down and shut the whole world down? Well, the thing is, if you do it now, when not too many people are sick and when the hospitals are not yet overwhelmed, then everyone's going to blow their so-called wad, so to speak, now, and then they're going to get worn out. And after about 2 weeks of quarantine, people start to get tired of it. If anything, people get tired of being at home and with the kids, and they get stir crazy. And then people start breaking quarantine. So if you issue another quarantine, a hard quarantine later, it's less effective, right? Each time you get less compliance by people. There's also another extremely important reason that I'm sure this audience and the two of you will definitely hone in on, and that is money. Most people have no savings. So in order to take vacation time, quote, or how much money they have saved up, how many people can take the time off for 2 weeks in the first place? But the thing is, we're going to need everyone to be really hard quarantined for 2 or 3 weeks later when the wave absolutely crashes on us. When we start having the diagnoses in the millions, which is going to happen in about a month, when that happens and it starts to overwhelm the entire medical system, and this giant wave is about to crash on the hospital system, which is like a little house underneath it, that is what England, Europe, and America is waiting for. And that is when they're going to say, now you do the hard quarantine to cut off that 25% of cases as much as possible to give some breathing room to the hospital system. So that is why Trump and those guys are kind of like, they have this mixed, they're caught in a spot because they're trying to warn people to get ready, but then people are panicked and they're saying, well, then why aren't you telling me to do more? And they keep backing off from what they're really waiting for. Does that make sense, guys?
Well, this is the thing that kind of gets me, is that there's been a lot of conflicting messages between what Trump is saying, what the vice president is saying. I don't think it's time to play politics. I think, yes, people are politicized this on the left, people politicize this on the right. The left was saying, quarantines are racist and all this other nonsense. But I think just having the example of Italy, even if Donald Trump would have taken aggressive actions, I don't think the politics matter here at all. And I think they shouldn't matter at all, especially when you look at what's happening right now in Italy. We're finding out that 50 to 70% of people are completely asymptomatic in one specific town in Italy when everyone got tested. This is one of the reasons why people are saying how quickly this spread. To me, slowing this down, not testing people, not doing the right steps because of politics is not an excuse, because people will die. And I've been taking this seriously since January too. People were making fun of me at Costco. I was telling all my family, all my loved ones, I was like, let's go, let's prepare for this. Let's make sure we have at least 2 months. And and then they're like, you're crazy. And again, panic is kind of setting in. This is not a time to play politics. And if you look at the successful cases of countries dealing with this, Singapore, the territory of Hong Kong, Russia, New Zealand, they follow the basic protocols of pandemics. The United States is not doing that. They're saying, and the two basic protocols that the United States is not doing is a full quarantine like those other countries did, and of course, aggressive testing. There's no tests. What's happening with the tests, doctor? Because Donald Trump promised us 1 million tests will be here. The tests aren't freaking here. I have a friend who's sick, who has a fever. Now I'm thinking of it. Two close people two close people that I personally know very well who are very symptomatic of this. They can't even get anything. What's happening with the tests, and why is Donald Trump saying there's 1 million tests when there's absolutely not?
Well, first off, this test issue is also occurring in England and other countries. So it's not just in America. One of the reasons that I've heard, so don't take this to the bank. So I haven't been able to confirm this in a second way, but is that there was, in perfect American style, is that when this coronavirus test was put together, it was bundled for, whatever reason, I guess someone's making a few bucks, with 2 or 3 other tests. And then when it went for approval, one of the other tests in the bundle didn't pan out. And so therefore the entire test kit that included the coronavirus test had to be thrown out because it was bundled together. Now, I think once that occurred, Donald Trump then said that's BS, and he just got rid of that restriction. But that was one of the hangups as well. Also, is trying to get the test kits. Keep in mind, it's not just a simple test where you just take a blood test. Also going to your doctor, you needed doctors to even recognize this problem and then send the samples to the 2 or 3 places that were available at the time. The other thing is that this test, I don't know if you guys are aware, because information is going so quick and it's hard to tell what the audience knows or doesn't know. But they have to use what's called a nasal pharyngeal swab. Do you guys know about that? Right?
Yeah. My friend was describing it, and he says it's not a very comfortable procedure, to say the least.
It's not. As a matter of fact, not to be funny about this, but if you ever go to to the fair, or you go to a carnival, the carnival guys, the sword swallowers, they take the sword and they stick it all down their throat. Well, there's also little cheap theatric tricks you can do where you can take a long sword or something and stick it in your nose, and it goes all the way in, and it freaks people out.
Don't try this at home.
Don't do it at home.
Not medical advice. Yes.
I still remember in medical school when our professor showed us this in lab, and they took one of our friends as the demo, and they put it in, and I was aghast watching. I didn't realize you could do that. This thing just went in and in and in. So you have to know where these different sinuses are, but you actually put the probe all the way in, and it goes a number of inches into your head. It's pretty disconcerting. But the point is that this is not just a little sputum sample. You need someone who knows how to do this, who actually can put that probe in, and that's one of the problems they have. The other issue is when they put this probe, it's like taking a long Q-tip and sticking it all the way back into your gag reflex. And you are going to cough, you're going to hack, you might almost have a vomit or a sensation reflex. So therefore, the person that is administering the test is going to be completely spit on, which means the healthcare worker has to take full precautions and be all bundled up in order to administer it. And then after they administer it, then they have to take all their clothes off and then rebundle up for the next patient because they can't contaminate the next person. So this is why it's a whole nother a sticking level. From patients' point of view, they just go to their doctor, they take a blood poll, and you find out in 2 days if you have a test. That's how patients think of this. But that's not what this is. It's an involved process, and also not to infect other people. So that's another part. Now, they're trying to also do this test not in hospitals, because they're trying to keep everyone from getting to the hospitals, which is what they did in China and with Italy as well. Everyone shows up, they overwhelm the system, and then everyone's sitting around coughing and hacking in the lobby, and the hospital is the last damn place you want to be. And that's what we've been warning on Freedom's Phoenix for quite some time. You have to be able to just, if nothing else, assume that you're going to get it and make sure that you can stay at home and self-diagnose, self-treat, and stay the hell out of the hospital as much as possible. And also, just a real quick thing, if you're going to get it, you want to get it now, because now the respirators are still available. Okay, that's the little trick or hint. Well, so if you know someone with coronavirus, go give them a nice big wet kiss. Hopefully you get it, and that way you can survive it now. When the tidal wave hits, there won't be enough respirators. But anyway, that's kind of the issue with this test, is they're not trying to have everybody in the hospitals, so therefore they want people in parking lots, which is a very, very good move. It's never been done before to offer these tests separate. So if you have a fever, they're telling you go to some remote area where they can administer this in your car. But now think about this. You're going to have some guy sit there and put a probe all the way into your nose, into your mouth, hacking and all this in your car, however they're doing this remotely. So
Yeah.
it is an undertaking. There's a lot of steps involved.
This is what kind of perplexes me, because as of March 11th, Russia administered close to 80,000 coronavirus tests. That's 870% more than the United States did. They have 0 deaths reported. There's a major ventilator maker, and this is according to Max Bergen, that recently came out and did interviews and says we could make and produce 500% more ventilators. No one's giving us these orders. The government's not telling us to do these things. The Surgeon General, CDC conflict each other. India is taking better approaches at the airport than we are. India is screening people as soon as they get out of the plane outside of the tarmac area. In the United States, people are lumped in together. It seriously feels like this government is trying to make this as bad as possible. That's my assessment on it because of how other countries successfully did it. I mean, how long did it take us to do those drive-through tests when South Korea was already doing this? This was way ahead. I mean, as me and you were prepping since January. Yeah. The government, I don't know what they're doing, but it seems like they're trying to make this worse, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't argue with some of those points. And you know, we are, look, not to be cliche about it, but this is a war. It's a war on an invisible enemy. And like with any war, you know, the truth and facts are one of the first victims, the infamous fog of war. And we're in a fog of war right now, you know, not to mention you throw in the internet on top of it. It is. I agree with you. I will admit that, you know, people like yourself and I and others have been watching this early. We saw the numbers, and there's no way that the CDC here in America, who's definitely keeping tabs on overseas, if nothing else, because China does the manufacturing and they also use our dollars to float the debt. So that's a whole nother reason that I was actually watching this as the economist in me, which is a whole other world before I got into medicine. So I was looking from that perspective, and I'm sure our government was watching it. Now, I'm not going to blame Trump on it, despite being a Trump fan, I will admit. So, and that's a whole other argument. But for the most part, but remember, it's not just him; it's the infrastructure underneath. You know, I mean, you don't become president and all of a sudden be in charge and understand who's running the CDC and what their talents are completely to handle this. So I don't know whether they are aware of it, where they're aware of it and not telling people, or playing a long game, maybe because of the economy. Remember, that's a whole nother issue, of course, is when do you tell people, when do you freak people out? How do you put a drag chute on the economy? Do you just let it go and focus on the virus? That's, in my opinion, you
just tell them the truth, because lying freaks them out. When the Surgeon General's saying masks don't work, and the majority of people are asymptomatic, don't that they have it, and they keep spreading it, and they're not wearing masks because the Surgeon General's telling them masks don't work. Come on, there has to be a burden of responsibility. Tim, I know you have some questions as well.
Yeah, I mean, and this really is kind of bleeding into all of Dr. Phranq's worlds. I mean, his main world is medical, and then also with Trump world, and they're both coming together right now. And one thing I picked up from the debates, which I watched very little of the debates the other day, actually the one that was out here in Phoenix, which I guess nobody went to, but which maybe was an excuse because no one wanted to go to anyways. But one thing I picked up there from the debate that I listened to is everything was, we need a strong leader we need one person to order this and one person to order that. And, and that's the big problem, is that, the problem is we've got governors doing different things. What we really need is a strong executive. We need that one person, that one Superman to just make all the orders. And to me, it's what Ernie always talks about, it's a classic, centralization versus decentralization. And it seems like everyone wants a more centralized response to this. And what do you think a centralized response versus, having a decentralized response, and where do you kind of fit in that spectrum?
Wow, right to the heart of it. Well, I'll tell you what, I have my own friends and family group chat that we've put together to keep ourselves informed around the country. And my sister, who is a statist, she works on Wall Street. So you can imagine, the arguments or the discussions we don't have, because she just thinks we're all crazy. Excuse me. She wound up sending me a link that she heard from Dr. Ron Paul. Did you guys happen to hear Dr. Ron Paul's comment just a couple of days ago?
What did he say exactly?
Yeah, I'll send you the link. It was interesting. And long story short, he was calling this, let's just say, very suspicious about the government jumping into all these measures because of coronavirus and using another crisis to take away freedoms, and which I completely agree on. And I had to try to be the broker between her and what Ron Paul was saying. It's kind of like what I do on Freedom's Phoenix. Not to be too funny here, but in my real world, my walking around world, all of my friends and family think I'm some crazy anarchist libertarian. except the days I'm on Freedom's Phoenix, because compared to Ernie Hancock and the true libertarians, I'm a statist. So I can't win on either side. I have to be kind of like that moderate. And I'm not a moderate, but I'm more of a libertarian conservative, to be honest. But anyway, I understand where Dr. Paul's coming from, and that's the issue, is that once people don't seem to pay attention, but once the crisis occurs, how quickly people are willing to give up their rights, how quickly they're willing to just give up freedoms out of panic and fear. They'll even give up their fellow neighbors and family people sometimes. I'll just give you just a couple examples. I mean, the one we all know, we saw what happened with Katrina, and they came and they just knocked on doors and took your gun, saying, it's an emergency. This time it's different. We have to do it, right? And people, most people just kind of buckled under and said, well, we have to at this time. Similarly, it's already starting. Just today, I think I sent you, Tim, there's right now a person in Kentucky, I think, who's under arrest, or not arrest, house arrest. The cops are outside his house because he refused to be quarantined. He's been diagnosed with coronavirus, and he's still going outside. So now he's under house arrest with the police standing outside. Also, those idiots, we're free capitalists, those two kids, brothers, who got all the hand sanitizer, that story that went around for a while. You guys remember that story?
Oh, yeah. Those guys are petty crooks compared to Wall Street, in my opinion.
No, exactly. No, I completely agree. But I'll tell you, there's the link. Thanks, Tim. But I'll tell you what, I don't know if you guys heard the rest of the story, but as they were getting inundated with hate mail and tweets and whatever else, I guess they took a break and they got out of town for a few hours because they were getting people showing up at their house. Well, as they were out of town, some of you may not have heard, but the Attorney General showed up to their house. And when they were not even there, they went into their garage and seized all of that hand sanitizer. Now, you've got people on the internet, the so-called internet, is saying, oh, good for the government because these guys are idiots and asses and, all the rest. But, yeah, okay, you could sit there and say that they're taking advantage, blah, blah, blah. But when people are very quickly able to turn on citizens and say, yes, the government can come in when you're not even home and just raid your inventory, and people are clapping, and it's starting already. Those are the concerns Dr. Paul's talking about. And yes, the decentralization versus the federal system. And one other point, I will give credit about some of the unification of the parties, one of which is Governor Mario Cuomo. He's doing a fantastic job, I got to say. I've been watching his press conferences. He is a leader. I'll tell you, he's stepping up to the plate. I'm very impressed. I mean, I agree with his politics and a lot of things. He's doing a damn good job and also explaining things. He's almost like a New Yorker version of FDR in the fireside chats right now. Check it out. And between the way that he's talking to his people and putting an olive branch out to Donald Trump from the federal government, they're working together with things. I think that's good. But of course, he's calling for the government to do, the federalist thing. The government should do everything at once, shut down every city, and do it unified so that people don't, quote, state shop, go from state to state. So if New York shuts down their bars, then everyone goes over the bridge to Jersey and they go to the bars there. So that's one of his excuses or explanations. Now, Donald Trump is taking it more from a decentralized point of view. Now, from a libertarian's point of view, he'll never be decentralized enough. I get that. But he is putting Mike Pence in charge of working with the governors and allowing the governors to take control of their individual states and do what they need to do. Case in point, Seattle. I just had a patient of mine who came the other day, and his wife is an ER nurse. Well, she told me that she's going into the belly of the beast next week because she was just offered, all the nurses, for emergency pay to go to Seattle. They're in dire need of nurses. So they're basically cherry picking and headhunting these nurses from other states. She's being offered $5,000 a week emergency crisis pay. So she's taken off over there. So probably the governor of Washington State is saying, hey, okay, well, here's the extra money that we need. And they're siphoning healthcare from other people. So again, should the individual states take control of it or the federal government? This is a perfect time where the rubber hits the road on that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we're seeing that, right now, a lot of people who were, I don't want to say necessarily anti-vaccine, but people who weren't necessarily pro-vaccine are now coming out and clamoring for the government to do something. And we need some sort of, cure for this. And so, I sort of see that being one of the, one of the side effects of this is you're going to see more clamoring for vaccines and more clamoring for, we need to give, I forgot how much money it was, like $8.6 billion to the big pharma in order to try to, produce a vaccine. Where are they at in terms of trying to produce a vaccine and how skeptical or, pro this potential vaccine are you? Not to hit you with another softball here, but
well, after 5 years debating Ernie Hancock once a week for 3 hours at a pop, I've been through the mill. By the way,
you're coughing there, Dr. Phranq.
I know, I'm coughing. I'm contained. There I go. So, by the way, just to give you a heads up, I wound up getting the flu myself about 2.5 weeks ago. Just the standard flu. It doesn't fit the symptoms of corona, blah, blah, blah. And none of my family has it. I don't even know how I got it, because all the nurses at both my medical offices know everyone's fine, but somehow, it's just this lingering cough. But I'll tell you what, normally it's not an issue, but now, to be politically incorrect, which I tend to be, I coughed, just this little cough, and everyone stares at you. And I said, God, I feel like being a black man at a KKK conference. Like, everyone you just get all that attention, and
I sneezed in church. I know that sneezing isn't nearly as bad as coughing, and you could see everyone had to turn around like it was a legitimate, just like allergy sneeze. Sorry.
I could see a Dave Chappelle skit on this somehow. But anyway,
someone coughs on me, I'm kicking them. I'm just being real here. Like, this fear is real, man. Like, a lot of people are dying.
I know I'm not contagious. Yeah. I know what I've got. But the thing is, I'm at a point where I just have to not be around people just because of the fear. So anyway, to go back to the virus, let me explain a little bit. I don't want to get too wonky here. So coronavirus is COVID-19, right? And the 19, just to be clear, because some people got this wrong, it does mean it's the 19th in the series, although it almost seems that way coming from China. But that aside, the 19 deals with 2019. Okay, that's when the outbreak started in China, so it's labeled 19. And probably by next year, when this virus mutates 50 ways to Sunday, we're going to have COVID 20, and probably we're going to have COVID 20A, COVID 20B. There may even be different variants of it.
We'll have the Big Short too, also. But assuming they can still make movies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Hollywood's tanking. But anyway, so you have coronavirus, and corona doesn't deal with the beer. It deals with what's called spiked proteins. So on a virus, there's these little proteins, and they sometimes can be like, on a microscope, they're like spiky. Each of these proteins like hairs. And that's therefore, when there's a bunch of them around the virus, it creates what looks like a corona, kind of like during a solar eclipse. That's what it looks like. And what they look for is one of these spike proteins tends to be the hook. It tends to be the attachment point to the human cell. Now, some of these spike proteins attach to a bat, a cell, a special protein in a bat or a pig. But somehow this thing mutated where one of those spike proteins can attach to something in the human being. And the first problem is to figure out what that is. So the first problem they have is to grow the virus. And that can take months sometimes, because usually when you take the virus and you put it into a human cell or any kind of cell, it kills it. So it takes time to find it's like you have to find a chimera, which is like maybe half bat, half guinea pig cell, and you put them together and you find some sort of cell that can incubate the virus and not kill it. So the good news is that they figured this out in 12 days, and that's pretty quick. So that was very good. They found a cell that they could breed it in, which then they can start to study it. Then they start to study this thing, and then they found the spike protein, and the spike protein is what's called an ACE. It's an ACE protein. Now, again, I promise I'll get off the wonkiness in a second, but to be real technical here, ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. And some of you are people listening, or maybe older, if you have hypertension, some of you take what's called an ACE inhibitor drug for blood pressure. And so that is what this is. It's an ACE protein. So this virus has found a way to attach itself to the ACE protein in the human body. So now we have a target. We know how this thing is attaching and what physiological processes are involved. So that's also good. So they figured that out. So therefore, once you understand the spike protein component and you can break it down, then you can find the test kit, which at least they had the information for the test kit. Now, manufacturing and all that, we're discussing those problems. But then you start on the vaccine. So now we get to the vaccine issue. Typically, of course, in typical government process, this takes years and years for safety. Unless it's the MMR combination vaccine, then we don't go through those safety checks. But that is a whole other issue. Okay, we'll put that aside. But for that point, you need to show some kind of safety. Now, some brave probably very sick people have put themselves up on the chopping block, including a 16-year-old up to some 50-year-olds. And they started the study already of giving this vaccine it was like a week or so. So they started already with the fast tracking. Now, keep in mind, normally no human being would have been injected with this stuff for at least a year or longer. But they went right in from 12 days of figuring out to breed it to now injecting people with it.
Hey,
so
$4,500 is $4,500. I think that's what they're giving out as cash for people to be the guinea pigs for this.
Yeah. Well, there's also some good things on the horizon I'll mention about antivirals that have been working as well. But we'll say that for a second. But you have this vaccine that they're trying right now. The good news is that they rushed it. President Trump took off all these restrictions and said, do it. There's a term, I forget the name of it, but basically when a patient is near death's door or they have no other options, the government still would say you're not allowed to try an experimental drug. Well, Donald Trump basically got rid of that. I mean, that was a few months ago, or actually about 6 months ago. I give him a lot of credit. He's allowing patients to try whatever they want if nothing else works. Go figure, thank God. Well, using that same bill and law that he passed, now they fast-track this vaccine. People have started it. That's the good news. So now the human studies have already begun. The downside, though, is that the quicker that you start without trying it on animals first, then the longer the safety period needs to be on the other end with human beings. Keep in mind, as much as everyone's in panic mode, get me the test kit, get me the vaccine. Oh, my God. Everyone wants it. But we're talking about a government deal here, and a lot of people listening don't always trust what the government says. So you have a government that's about to mass produce a vaccine that has not been tested in animals and will barely be tested properly in humans, and then mass injected in all of our families, our children, everyone at once. That is a massive risk and undertaking from a medical perspective. I'm just saying that doesn't even include, the whatever else the government could do. And I'm not trying to go down conspiracies and be that cynical, but that's a whole other concern for some people. I know.
Let's tease the people with all that next time, because I know you do have to get going. And anytime we ask you a question, I know we could talk for hours, and we definitely.
All right. Well, I'm getting all technical. Anyway, so the long story short is we're looking at, and they just said this on the conference the other day, is that we're looking at about a year that these people who started the trial last week until we find out if it's safe enough. So that means we're not even going to have a vaccine really approved and ready until 2021 early.
Well, I know I'm not holding my breath for a vaccine, but with Dr. Phranq is a wealth of information on so many different subjects, and we hope he's going to come back as a frequent guest, because it's not only just on the medical side of things. Hopefully it doesn't get crazier on the medical side of things, but I have a feeling it is going to. But, a wealth of information is so many different topics. So, we definitely appreciate having you here. Where can people find more information about you? I know you're not really big online, not big social media, but is there anywhere someone can find out more information, where to follow you besides, I know there's Freedom's Phoenix, that's with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. You got the Trump Report, where you're pretty much a weekly guest on there for the past 5 years, probably even longer. We do a lot of joint shows in there every now and then too. So where else can people find you?
Well, as far as the political talk, I plenty of archive shows. If you're interested, not to be a cheap commercial at the end, but for prostate cancer, I do prostate cancer assessing before people have their prostates biopsied or removed for an early low-risk cancer. They usually have me kind of figure out, are you the type that can outlive it, or is it really, do you have a pit bull in you? And that assessment we do in our offices. You can look me up, just put in Tamburri, prostate cancer, and you'll see my name. Right now, you can find me at the Rockwood Medical Center, the Rockwood Natural Medical Center in Scottsdale, Arizona. So Rockwood, Tamburri, prostate cancer, you'll see me everywhere up there. Politics and prostates, that's pretty much my world.
They're very related, in my opinion. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Phranq,
all right,
for joining us today.
And I appreciate it. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Look forward towards more lively conversations here on Change the News channel.